Good morning to both of you. It looks like Richard's in his... Wait, are those 49er colors again?
Absolutely.
Hey, Skip, I just happened to pull this out the closet today. I don't know.
What are we doing?
Is it?
No, let me see it. Show Skip your elbow, though. I want to see the patch on.
Well,
come on.
this is just a little
accent.
This is a little accent, guys.
Are you
Beautiful.
Richard, you don't play football anymore, man. Stop it.
I can't just get dressed in the morning, King.
We got to get him some pom-poms so he can do some pom-poms for us. Okay, back to Kliff Kingsbury. Keyshawn, you first, please. How do you explain everything that just happened?
Well, let's start with the Raiders situation. This is how I explain that. It broke down in conversations about contracts and whatnot and certain individual power and the way you do the hiring on the offensive side from everything that I understand to be true. He wasn't going to get the ultimate power, so to speak, to build his staff out the way that he probably envisioned it, nor the offset from a money standpoint that's owed to him from the Arizona Cardinals. So he decided I had better opportunity possibly with another team. That team is Washington. But the big question now is we all come to the conclusion that Kliff Kingsbury, sitting at the number 2 spot in Washington
in the draft,
is now looking at a quarterback, and that quarterback potentially could be Caleb Williams, who comes from a similar system that Kliff Kingsbury ran at Texas Tech as well as with the Arizona Cardinals.
Yep.
And they, to most people, need a quarterback. That Sam Howell's not the guy.
Yep.
But here's what I would say to that. Caleb Williams is from the Washington, D.C. area.
He is.
People have speculated that Caleb Williams does not want to be the number 1 overall pick to Chicago Bears for a number of reasons. Chicago has yet to ever develop a quarterback. I don't believe Chicago should go after Caleb Williams anyway. I think they needed to hire somebody that could get Justin Fields to his full potential, whatever that is. That's just the way that I see it from Justin Fields' standpoint. Now, when you talk about Kliff Kingsbury, what is it that he's bringing to the Washington Commanders? He's going to bring a wealth of knowledge from an offensive mind that could certainly put some points on the board. They averaged slightly below 24 points a game as the offensive coordinator, head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. That's not bad. That's not great. It's just, it's kind of like middle of the road, middle of the pack. Got to run the football, though. Can't just throw it all over the lot. The air raid system has never really taken it to the next level and won anything. Now you say, well, what about Caleb Williams? We don't know if the Washington Commanders want Caleb Williams. We just are speculating.
Yeah.
We don't know if Kliff Kingsbury wants Caleb Williams. We have no idea at all whatsoever. It's between now and the draft, there's so much evaluations that have to go on with all these other quarterbacks and Jaden Daniels out of LSU. What is that? When you start to really break it down, now, you say from a defensive standpoint, they went out and got Joe Whitt Jr. from the Dallas Cowboys. You mentioned Skip, whatever, I'm not really worried about that. I wouldn't be worried about it either because Dan Quinn is still probably going to call the defense for the Washington Commanders. He's probably going to call it. I don't see why he wouldn't call it.
Agreed.
He called it in Atlanta.
Yeah.
He called it in Dallas. He called it in Seattle. No one else did. So you lose something there from a staff standpoint. But that's okay because if you're interviewing guys like Mike Zimmer, who I'm high on, and I believe that Zim should be the guy in Dallas, or even maybe there's a sniff around, maybe there's a Rex Ryan in your future, or what may be the case. I think, though, the Commanders will be a team in the future that potentially could cause some noise in the NFC East, but who's to say? I mean, really, who's to say? Caleb is from the D.C. area. That means a lot, obviously, going back home to play. But you just don't know. We can't just assume, Skip, that he is the second coming of Patrick Mahomes. I mean, when you look at his college career at USC, he didn't play all that great against the better competition, the stiff competition. Yes, he put up some phenomenal Heisman Trophy numbers and did some things. Even in that Heisman Trophy season, when you look at the better teams, he kind of I don't want to say struggle, but it wasn't so overwhelming where you just go, oh, my God. When you really break it, you just go, oh, my God. Now, when you got these wizards, as you know, Rich, starting to break these things down, and I've always said throughout the course of the season from September to December, somebody's always the number 1 pick. And remember, I've always said this, Skip, the real evaluation starts right now. when they start to break down the film because the seasons are over. Now they have nothing else to do except look at the prospects, look at the free agents, and then start to compare. And then when you roll into the draft time and the combine and all that, that's when you gather in this information to find out if he, in fact, is the guy.
Okay, so before Richard goes, it sounds like you, as a faithful USC follower, are not sold on a young man who won a Heisman Trophy at your school 2 years ago, right?
It's not that I'm not sold. I'm just not one that always put the cart before the horse. I am a patient, wait and see. Let's evaluate. Let's break it down. Let's find out what it really truly is, because there's a lot of circumstances surrounding around draft picks. There's Marvin Harrison Jr. According to Mel Kiper and ESPN, for instance, he's number 1 on the board. Caleb is 2. Okay, and
so
then
if Chicago decides we're going forward with Justin Fields,
I'm taking Marvin Harrison Jr.
Well, you just would, which would leave Caleb for Washington.
I would absolutely. Now, but what I would do if I'm Chicago, if I feel, and I can get this feeling between now and draft time by just having a conversation with Washington that they really want Caleb, I'll do what San Francisco did to go up to get Trey Lance, is I'm to move up a couple pieces to go from 2 to 1. Man, you got to give me something. You're going to have to give me, because I'm going to play that position. You're going to have to give me a couple ones possibly. I don't have the chart in front of me, but I'm going to steal something from Washington if they fall in love with Caleb. If Kliff Kingsbury is given the autonomy to make the decision, because that's essentially what it's going to be, is Kliff Kingsbury is making that quarterback decision for Caleb, ooh-wee, I'm about to highway robbery if I'm Chicago and Ryan Poles.
Right.
Okay.
Right. But I think this is a great hire by them. I think Kliff Kingsbury, in my time in the National Football League playing against him, he's really creative offensively in terms of the passing game and the concepts that they draw up. It's not the common concepts you're used to seeing. It's not the common quarterback reads that you're used to seeing. It's very intricate. And so I've had a couple times, where I had talked to him after the game and was like, bro, I got a lot of respect for the concepts that you're drawing up. Like, it's some good stuff. Now, the run game was pretty pedestrian. They didn't do enough defensively. He didn't have success, so I don't know what he is as a head coach. But in terms of a play drawer, he can do it. And I think they'll still, Dan Quinn is part of the Pete Carroll tree. He's been under, so they're going to run the football no matter what. But I'm with Key. I'm not totally sold on Caleb Williams. And if I'm the Chicago Bears, I know that Sean Payton wants him pretty bad. So you got Denver in fold. You got the Raiders in fold. You got a lot of teams that need quarterbacks. So if I'm them, I'm talking to the Commanders and I'm telling them, hey, I could give him away to Denver or the Raiders, or I can give him to these teams if you guys don't want to give me what I need to move up. I do think the Commanders are saying, hey, we're getting Kliff Kingsbury because we believe, or we want Caleb Williams in the fold. We believe we can get him. We believe we will have access to him. That's why they're getting Kliff Kingsbury. I don't think they're getting Kliff Kingsbury to draft Drake May or anybody else, or Jaden Daniels either. I think they're getting him very specifically, and if they don't get him, that'd be a massive disappointment for this franchise, but they'll go for it. But I think, again, Chicago obviously has all the leverage here. They can do whatever they want. They can move it however they want. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is their pick, and I would assume that it would be my pick if I was the Chicago Bears, because I think Justin Fields can get it done. I would sit there and get a king's ransom for him, move not too far off the first pick, maybe to the third or so, and stay in striking range to make sure I do get Marvin Harrison Jr., if nothing else.
You see, the problem, though, if Marvin Harrison does not go 1, sitting at 4, I believe right now is Arizona. Arizona needs a big receiver and a guy like that, so they would take him at 4. Skip, the problem is they're sitting at 2. They're not at 1. And in my eyes, just from watching college football, literally, as much as you do, Skip, sitting in on Saturdays, analyzing college football, there's not that big of a gap between Caleb Williams and what I've seen from Jaden Daniels at his time at LSU and early in his career at ASU. There's just not. So I don't know.
How about Drake May? Have you seen him?
I've seen Drake May. I like the other 2 better.
So do I.
I like the other 2 better.
And I've watched Drake May enough to say no.
Yeah, I'm not going to say no.
Yeah, but I'm just saying is the top pick.
Yes,
the first guy to go off.
Exactly. So if I'm Chicago And much like Richard just said, I got Luke Getsy now at I almost called him Oakland, Las Vegas Raiders, as the offensive coordinator, very familiar with the quarterback at Justin Fields. I use that card if I'm Ryan Poles to be able to say, hey, if you want to move one to get your guy, I'll swap spots with you, but I need this, this, and this because I like Jaden Daniels as well. Because we on our board, one is a 9.5 and one is an 8, not too far off. That's the way I would be selling it if I'm the Chicago Bears. Or if you don't, and I'm Washington, I'll call their bluff and say, go ahead, you take him because I like Jaden Daniels as well. So that's the jockeying of position there, Skip, come draft time.
Okay, I got it. All right, I'm going to hark back to Friday. We talked about this at the end of the show. Obviously, Richard wasn't with us on Friday, but we talked about Kliff Kingsbury going to the Raiders in Antonio, and I was gushing and raving about it because I'm with Richard on this. I really believe in Kliff as a play caller, a creative offensive mind. If you look back at his track record at all the quarterbacks, the young quarterbacks he's coached, remember at Tech, he had Mahomes and Baker. And if we go back to A&M, he did have Johnny Manziel in a Heisman season, so you got to give him that. And then he has Kyler. So and then he spends a year. Last year he was just sort of an offensive analyst, but he was the kind of the quarterback coach. Obviously, Lincoln coaches the offense.
He came in probably 3-4 games into the season. They added him to the staff.
Okay. So and Caleb didn't have the year last year that he had the year before. And I'm with you on this. I'm still a little shaky. I even told you last summer, the first time we actually met to talk about you joining me here. We talked about Caleb, and I watched him at Oklahoma every snap, obviously. He's only about 6 feet tall. He plays bigger than 6 feet, and you've stood next to him because he's one of your guys, but he's not 6'4". He's not that prototypical 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" height. But he is a rare playmaker. I got to say, when it is time just to make one up and let it fly, I'm not sure this side of Mahomes that I've ever seen anything in college football quite like what Caleb can do, because he has a huge arm.
Very Johnny Manziel.
But bigger. You know, bigger, stronger, bigger arm.
You don't make that comparison. That's not a good NFL comparison.
I'm talking about the running around.
The running around.
Being able to run around and make something out of nothing, not the other stuff.
All right, now I'm going to drive home this point. When you're talking about the Philadelphia Eagles or the Washington now Commanders, you have to remember that their mission in life is to beat Dallas. It's not the other way around. It's a one-sided rivalry from both Philly and Washington.
So you don't think Dallas's mission is to beat?
No, well, they don't think of it as their mission. It is. In the end, you need to win your division, control your division.
But why could it be for them and not for y'all?
It just is. I've grown up with this. I've covered it for years. And when I go to those cities, I'm like amazed at how seriously they take Dallas, when Dallas during Philadelphia week or Washington week never takes them that seriously. It's a rivalry.
And that may be the truth because I played on the Dallas teams. Part of that is, though, Skip, because of you. People like you.
No, I agree.
Make the fan base go crazy.
I agree.
That's why.
Okay, but as they go through the offseason, they're thinking, Dallas. How can we beat Dallas? And for what it's worth, the Cowboys did win the division once again. I think they backed into it because Philly fell on their faces. But the point was, as you watch the offseason hires, you watch Philadelphia go get Kellen Moore because he knows Dallas inside and out and had great success at Dallas to run the Eagles offense. And they go get a Vic Fangio because he has had recent success against Dallas. And here we go with Kliff Kingsbury. And if you think hard about this, when he was the Arizona coach, they went to Dallas twice and embarrassed the Cowboys. The first one was an annihilation on Monday Night Football. I don't know if you guys remember this. It was 2020, pandemic year. But it was a Monday night at Dallas. And Kyler and company just took Dallas apart. It was 38-10. Kyler had a QBR of 83, again, scale 0 to 100. He rushed for 74 yards, threw for 188. Well, not huge, but they just went up and down the field and did whatever they wanted to do to Dallas's defense. And then we're going back 2 years ago. They went in there. It was late in the season, week 17, and it was the score indicates it's much closer than it actually was. It was 25-22. But again, Kyler just had his way, threw for 263, ran for another 50 yards, and Kliff Kingsbury toyed with the Dallas defense. So I'm thinking that played some part in the thought process in Washington of let's go get a guy who's had real success against Dallas, even at Dallas, and coaching young quarterbacks against Dallas. So this makes sense to me that they went Dan Quinn and Kliff Kingsbury. The Joe Whitt thing, I told you the other day, Keyshawn, I couldn't pick him out of a lineup. He was never talked about as the sort of assistant defensive coordinator, head coach, like.
But you're amazing, though, Skip.
But nobody even knows about him. Nobody. I know about Al Harris because I know what he did with my secondary, and I was afraid that Dan Quinn would take Al Harris with him.
Well, I mean, he might still take. He still may take him as a DB coach. It's not over with.
Yeah, it's not.
But you're amazing.
They're
the reason
not
I
let him
say
go lateral.
Well, yeah, that's true too. You know what's so amazing about you, Skip? You really, in your mind, has sat at home in the last 24 to 48 hours, really thinking that they hired these coaches just to beat the Dallas Cowboys.
I think that was a factor.
Right.
But it's always a factor with them.
Of course.
It's been historical.
Not just with them. You think about teams that are coaches that have good designs and good minds that you've gone up against and they had success against you. Not in particular, because in 2020, Dan Quinn wasn't the defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. Am I correct?
See, he was there.
He wasn't there. It was Mike Nolan, right?
3. Yes, going back to, was Mike Nolan still there? Now I'm getting lost.
I feel like it was Mike Nolan, but I could be wrong.
Look that up.
But in the end, though, Skip, you hire somebody that has the ability to put points on the board, to score, to do all of these sort of things to help you. Now, in terms of the Philadelphia Eagles, Sherm, you go and get Vic Fangio for whatever reason. I don't know why he's such this amazing defensive coordinator.
But he's done some numbers on Dallas.
Well,
he has.
Yeah, on Dallas.
Yes.
But when you look at his history,
I understand.
Outside of the tenure with the San Francisco 49ers and Harbaugh,
spectacular.
Other than that, he's been pedestrian to me as a DC. I mean, think about dude just got fired from Miami.
Yeah.
And they fired him as a DC when their defense started to get hurt, when they lost their 2 edge rushers and the corner was in and out of the lineup and Xavier Howard, they decided to move on from a guy that was supposed to be this great defensive coordinator. So I don't know that the Eagles are saying we're going to get the second coming of Marvin Lewis of the Baltimore Ravens to take on the Dallas Cowboys. I don't see it that way.
Yeah, what I do see that they're trying to improve their team, Skip. I think these were great hires by Philadelphia. I think they're great hires by the Commanders. I don't know Joe Whitt necessarily as a coordinator, but I know Dan's going to probably call the defense. And, how those situations go. I know they'll be stout up front. They'll be good. I'm sure he would have appreciated if they hadn't traded away their 2 best pass rushers. But they still have Payne. They still have guys that can get the job done. In terms of these quarterbacks, I think Jaden Daniels is moving up a lot of people's list, even above Caleb Williams. But I don't think anybody will step outside of the shadow of the hype that has been Caleb Williams. So somebody will draft him first just based off the hype. And I'm not sure NFL evaluators see him the same way the hype machine does. But Drake May, I think, is just one of those guys that you see a 10 in Carolina, in a North Carolina blue, and you can't help but see Trubisky. And unfortunately, that you get that court, you get Trubisky didn't have success. It was almost like the Ohio State deal, kind of hurting Justin Fields and C.J. Stroud. It was when you get in those schools and you have those situations of guys that have come before you and not had success. If I would have went to Carolina, I would have wore 2 or 7 or something other than 10 because I don't want to be compared to Trubisky because Trubisky was supposed to be the second coming of this great quarterback. And he has fizzled out in the National Football League. And no matter what, as long as people see that tape and see you in that jersey and you remind them of him, you'll get some red flags.
No, that is so. That is true.
Richard, we didn't get your take on this. Were you disappointed that Dan Quinn didn't go to Seattle?
I was disappointed that Seattle didn't pick Dan Quinn.
That's what I mean.
I was 100% disappointed in that. I thought that was a hand-in-glove fit. Obviously, Mike McDonald has been tremendous this year, has been phenomenal, had Baltimore playing some of the best football in a long time defensively. He's a very smart man, very ingenuitive defensively, but I just thought this was cultural. You know, I thought this was a guy that knew cultural. It was a cultural fit. It was a guy that knows Pete's coach.
I liked it.
I said cultural.
It was a Stanford word.
It was a Stanford word. But go ahead. I'm sorry. You're trying to talk. Instead of saying engineered, you said something else.
Ingenuitive.
Yeah, I like that. We know what it means. Never heard it before.
Right. You know what I'm trying to say.
I know what you're saying, but I've never heard it before. Let me, Richard, though.
That's okay.
You coined another word.
So, Richard, do you think, though, knowing Seattle and knowing what they think up there and how they think, had the Dallas Cowboys defense played better down the stretch, is it his job?
Yep. 100%. 100%. I think that collapse against Green Bay is what cost them the job. And obviously, Baltimore having success against Mahomes the way they did in the second half also helped. You know, it's what have you done for me lately, Keith?
Yep.
And that's the unfortunate part. I thought history would play a part in it. You know, I mean, Dan Quinn, everybody talks about the Legion of Boom defenses. He was the coordinator both years we went to the Super Bowl. Both years we had the best defense in football. He was a big part of that. And he's a big part of the culture and the mindset of that team and that defense. And I thought that would have just been a perfect fit. But, you know, I'm sure Mike will do a great job.
Yeah, what's funny about that is on the Monday after the championship games, a week ago today, remember, Playmaker sat right here, Michael Irvin, and said it was a fireable offense that Mike McDonald let Travis Kelce go 9 for 9 on targets and catches in the first half. Remember that? Which put them behind the 8 ball, obviously. And then, to your point, they rallied in the second half and played great the way they should have in the first half. All right, final thought about Caleb Williams. I still say Kingsbury to Washington has Caleb Williams written all over it. It just feels like it to me because...
And he's from D.C.
That's what I mean. Caleb is the hometown hero. He would renew the hope and the hype, and it would be a great sell for Washington in a city that needs something to root for because that franchise, it's a sleeping giant, but it's been down for so long, and it's been so embarrassed by the former owner.
They tried with the Ohio State quarterback, Haskins.
Yeah.
He was from the area too.
True. Yeah.
They tried the hometown stuff before. I personally don't necessarily believe in the hometown stuff because it adds too much pressure to players when they immediately come out and they go home.
Yeah.
I mean, it just not going back to home. I mean, the LeBron James situation is a little different, but for the most part, when guys get drafted at home, it's just...
I know, but one thing about Caleb, and you've been around him, I think he can stand up to that.
He might be. Well, I mean, he might be able to. Some would say yes, and some would say, you know, there's a lot of influence around young men nowadays than it was in the past. So it's a little bit different now, Skip.
Okay, interesting. We'll get back to all of the above in a few minutes here, but up next, why did Bill Belichick come out of left field with this full-page ad thanking Patriot fans yesterday? We discuss next.
No mercy, no mercy, no mercy.
Thanks for watching, Undisputed fans. Do you want more highlights from the show? Make sure to click that subscribe button for all the exclusive content from Undisputed.